That's your argument.
Yep.
All right, Wilkister, juzi PS Kivicho amesema ya kwamba hii kitu mtakula kama dawa ya polio. Do you think we have a constitutional moment in this country?
First of all, there's this word in Luo that say it's called cargo. When a kid refuses to drink their porridge, you have to hold them like this and hold their nose so that the only option they have is to drink whatever you put in their mouth, right? To swallow it. And I feel that is what they are doing to Kenyans with the BBI. I do agree that public participation is very, very important for the citizenry and particularly for the young people who form the bulk majority of the citizenry at this point. Looking at the open government partnership, where he says it comes from, public participation is one of the really, really important issues in there. And for Kenya to be a signatory to that and not even adhere to things that it signs itself onto, first of all, is very, very problematic. That said, it doesn't mean that BBI is here and we should reject whatever comes of it. I have participated in the processes to give some of the recommendations that came from young people, and I also sat with women to also front, recommendations for that will support women. We are also seeing some of the things coming out, like the new constituencies that now senators may, run for a woman and a male representative, and we may actually have a 50-50 Senate, and that's one of the gains we have to see in there. So for me, it doesn't mean that in as much as this is not a bottom-up approach, because BBI really, in earnest, was created by the leaders, for the leaders, but now being given to Mwananchi as their thing. That is not the truth, right? So I think there are things that were noble in terms of what this BBI was addressing: ethnic majoritarianism, the poor representation in parliament for minority groups, strengthening devolution, the mtu mentality, but also in terms of even strengthening devolution while creating another tier of inefficiency with the regional governments. We are forgetting that down where devolution is happening with the county governments, there's clanism going on. So are we creating more problems or are we solving problems that we have? So I think for every solution they're trying to create, there's a problem that has not been fixed yet. And I feel that is what we really need to address. Yeah.
But even on the same thing, Wilkister, talking about the same thing. How realistic is it? Because we are talking about a country that's struggling with loans. It's struggling with funding its exchequer. It's struggling with funding its projects. It's struggling with even paying salaries. As we speak today, county workers are yet to receive salaries. Even when you talk about creating more seats in the BBI to achieve an affirmative action in a place where democracy takes charge, what sense would it make to add, let's say, 40 senators to carry in for the women? Is it? Do you think it's realistic enough? Even as you talk about all these amendments and all these things that you want to fill in, how realistic do you think it is? You as a woman, yes, you might say, all right, we are going to be happy we'll have 40 seats for the women. But the question is, does it fix the country? And how realistic is it? At a place we are struggling with loans. The other day, Anko ametoka kuomba loan ingine 180 billion from France to come and fund. Actually, I think there is a money that was released with the counties, because it's until then that he said, okay, guys, I'm committing. We might talk about all these things that we want to see in this country, but how realistic and objective is that discussion?
In a sense, there is a way it's fixing problems with the country and giving more positions to women and having them actually run for office, because the women legislators who have been nominated to these seats will tell you they do not have the same voice or legitimacy that the other people who've come in through the ballot have. So for me to have women run and now reduce the nomination seats, it's a win. It's a win for the women, it's a win for the nation, because now women will be running for office as people, really would like to see. And I have argued before in other fora that BBI is not solving the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue for Kenyans, as Dr. here had said, is livelihoods. How can I put food on my table? Where will I sleep tonight? Can I go to school? Can I access healthcare? Can I, the basic things. And that is what Kenyans are asking for. But as I had said earlier, this process has been a top-down approach. And there's a problem with that, especially when you're sitting at a place of what is this word? At a place where you're advantaged in a way, you do not see what it's like having an out of touch communication with the vast majority of the population. Because you're talking about positions mostly for the top guys, and you're forgetting that Mama Mboga just wants to sell her mboga. She wants people to buy. The local shopkeeper just wants their business to survive. The young person needs employment opportunities, and everyone just wants to thrive within the economy. So for me, and I don't mince my words when I say livelihoods is very important, and the BBI may not be addressing that directly, but there are issues that are also important that the BBI is addressing.
All right. Dr. Adi, we are talking about 13 regional governments and as are going to come up. We are talking about all these assets that need to be created. And the question is, what are the fundamental problems that Kenyans have? We're talking about land, we're talking about resource conflicts and all that. I mean, when you talk about reports in this country, for how long are you going to be fed with reports? We have the Ndungu land report lying there. We have the Waki report. We have all these reports. We have the TJRC report, which has not been implemented. When we talk about packaging a report in the name of BBI that's going to bring continuous changes, we talk about creating more seats and expanding the government. At what cost is it to the Kenyan? And do you feel it has the vibe of the common mwananchi? What are really the fundamental problems in this country?
Yeah, no, I think... I think listening to what my sister is talking about, I think is actually quite illuminating. But suffice it to say that what are the major problems Kenyans face? What are the real issues? And is BBI going to address these issues? So number one, the issue of inclusion and the issue of dealing with ethnic belonging. How do you deal with ethnic belonging by giving positions to 3 or 4, 5, elites from a particular community? If anything, what you do is you entrench ethnicity. You make ethnicity the organizing principle of our politics. As a country, we need to be moving away from organizing based on tribes, on ethnicity, on religion. We need to be organizing around policies, around around programs, around ideology, around what is best for Kenya, what is the best vision, around competing visions. That is what we need to be organizing around. But what BBI is doing, apparently, if that is that is the view, it will serve to entrench ethnicity. We will have ethnic hegemons, ethnic chiefs, whom all of us as citizens will be owning allegiance. They will be the gatekeepers. They will control our lives, so that if they don't open the door, you cannot enter. So we are creating more barriers to participation if that is the model of leadership that we think that we want to embody. The other issue really is like you said, and like ADUMA says, it's the economy. How do we expand this economy? Do we expand it by creating, more bureaucracy? What is our thinking around, fiscal discipline? What is our thinking around corruption? At both the national and the county level, what is our thinking around efficiency? Is BBI addressing these issues? I do not know, because I haven't seen any document, at all. And then lastly, this issue around competition. How do we manage political competition? How do we de-risk our politics? And I think there are a range of things that one can do around building resilient institutions, building confidence around these institutions, so that whatever decisions they render would be decisions that the citizens can look at and say, I trust this institution, and therefore I'm willing to go by the decision they have arrived at. So we do not necessarily fix our politics or our political competition by saying, let's have everybody at the table, because we cannot afford that. It's completely not possible.
Who is everybody? By the
Who
way?
is everybody? A country as huge as the United States
Because
of
everybody is
America.
50 million people.
Exactly. A country as huge as the United States of America has only 2 major political parties. It has all these federations, obviously. All right? So really, what you need is robust, powerful political parties that can mobilize a movement behind them, It's backed by an ideology. It has very clear structures. What we are seeing is a situation where political parties are being destroyed and dismembered every day under the current constitution. You know, is BBI going to address this? We're dealing with political culture issues, which no constitution can be able to fix. And then lastly, the issue of devolution. I mean, how do you imagine you're going to increase shareable revenue to 35%? And yet right now, even the 15% that is mandated by the constitution
is a problem.
Is a problem, okay? All right? In any event, if we wanted to increase shareable revenue to 35, nothing stops the government from doing that under the current framework, because all we have in the constitution is that it's a minimum of 15%. So government can go all the way to 30% if it so wished, based on availability of resources. We have never had resources to even meet the 15% threshold. How are we expected, you know, to find resources to be able to meet the 35% threshold? So we are making promises that are not really backed by evidence. They are not backed by science. They are not backed by fiscal realities. They are political. They are sweeteners, which at the end of the day will hit an implementation brick wall as soon as it is adopted. You know, what BBI appears to be is merely a stage to mobilize our politics, and will have very little in terms of qualitative returns, to Kenyans.
All right. WILKISTER, you work in the youth space. Let's talk about promises. Dr. mentioned something about promises. And you've been promised that once BBI passes, the youth will get jobs. You see that a policy space where you talk about policy issues for young people, getting employment and all that. We have a big 4 agenda that's already stalled. One of the wing was manufacturing, which I feel would actually create a lot of opportunities for young people, because it's about creating jobs, creating spaces where the young people can work. You see that a space where youth development consultant. Are you also part of do you think it realistic? Because the Kenya's problem, do you think you're going to fix jobs, you're going to get us jobs in a document? What's your feeling as a young person in terms of what the vision and visions for young people in the BBR?
If I drop all my titles and speak as a youth of Kenya, I am disappointed greatly. I know of a friend of mine, we went to university together. He's now selling boiled eggs. He has a master's degree. Right? And someone even ran his story because it was so sad to see him selling boiled eggs in a bucket. We've been promised jobs since time immemorial. I think it's any leader who wants to vie for office will tell young people that I'll give you jobs. The Big 4 agenda was noble in the sense that all the areas where the activity was going to be manufacturing, housing, and all that. These were places where potentially young people could find employment. And it is sad. It is very sad how we politicize things that are supposed to give benefit to the Mwananchi. BBI right now looks like an organizing tool for 2022. The short-termism of our leaders is disturbing. And for someone else to stand and talk about them wanting to give jobs through the BBI, which they even promised in their manifesto before the BBI, it is misplaced, it is wrong, and it is a disservice to the young people of this country. A young person.
That was a very emotional submission. Let's talk about democracy, Daktari. From the president's speech yesterday, he was almost victimizing democracy. Like this, I feel that he feels because political competition is based from a democratic space. Multipartyism is what we fought for early in the 90s. And there seems to be a feeling that, and even if you see what is happening right now, this is almost borrowing a leaf from China. We want to create one big party, one big ball where everyone dances in it. Is it a reverse of democratic spaces? When you also look at the structure of leadership, they're saying that you're going to have a supreme president who's going to appoint his vice president, prime minister, and all that. Let's look at it this way. As we speak, we're having problems with the president and his deputy who are elected on a ticket. What is the danger in terms of the democratic maturity of a country when you talk about having a president who appoints his juniors, and they can actually decide to fire them, and they can say and tell them, don't come to work tomorrow. Let's look at multi-party democracy, because I think that is where we've gotten our field as a country. As we speak, the ruling party Jubilee has collapsed into opposition. They're in bed together. We have a Jubilee and NASA thing, and it looks like even Jubilee is being swallowed by ODM. when you look at it that way and you read the vibe around the president with the way he was speaking, because for me, I felt like he was telling us that multi-party democracy, which is the basis of it, because Kenya is a very competitive country in terms of politics, very competitive. It's a very competitive space in terms of where you want to get to and how you are going to get there. It's a very competitive process. The president was giving us a feel of, guys, the problem that you have in this country is politics, and it's the politics of sense of multi-party democracy, having several parties looking for the same thing. And when you talk about winner not taking all, means let's all be in one basket, let's eat together. What does it mean for democracy? Because the space of democracy is an opposition and a place of government.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gerald. I think you're completely right. Kenyans, fought and struggled. Many lost their lives in order to secure our multi-party state. Back then in 1990s, Kenyans were constantly on the streets agitating, for a political voice, an alternative political voice, because up until that time, you could only articulate, you could only be heard, if you were in one hegemonic national party, called KANU. Kenyans refused and repudiated that vision, that unilinear, unilateral, singular, voice by which, they were ruled and controlled. Kenyans believed that in their diversity, whether cultural or political, they could all contribute to the pot, of decision making and enrich decision making. And therefore, in the 2010 Constitution, if you read Article 4, this is a fundamental principle of our Constitution that declares our republic. It declares that Kenya is a sovereign republic, goes ahead and says Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state founded on national values. And I can tell you for free, Gerald, this Article 4 is one of those provisions of our Constitution that you really cannot amend. There is no way Kenya is going back into a single party state or a two-party state. Kenyans are so diverse. Kenyans want to articulate their views, their interests, their challenges. They want to canvass their aspirations, using different political parties, and that is something that Kenyans are not going to countenance at all. And so I do not want to believe that the president was well advised to make the case for a reversion of our multi-party character. We will not move in the direction of Uganda. We will not move in the direction of Tanzania, because we're a different country. I think if there's something Kenyans love, it is their freedom. They love their freedom even more than their food. You'd rather deny Kenyans food, but let them speak. Let them engage. Let them tell you what their perspective is. And so you cannot shut down the democratic space, whether in political parties, whether through the media. And we are seeing the same trend as well, where the media has been, it's basically been captured, so that people with divergent views. You had the other day in K24, where a panelist was locked out because it was perceived that what he was going to tell Kenyans were going to be views that ran counter to the views of the owners of the station. And so Kenyans love and cherish and honor and will die for their freedoms, especially, the right to express themselves, the right to assemble, the right to vote into office, their leaders, etc., etc. And that is something that Kenyans will not compromise on. Yeah.
Well, the same thing, since you sit the place where you interact with the deputy president, you advise him. I'm sure you've even advised him this morning. Yesterday's events at Mashujaa in Gusii Stadium, there was almost a play out of an almost direct disagreement with the president and his deputy on the issues of Raila first came and told us Reggae is here. Reggae did not stop. He took a break and he's going to come back. The deputy president came in and said that I hope what he was talking about, Baba is going to, the reggae is going to be inclusive. And the president seems to sharply disagree agree with his deputy on what WIBIA is all about. The deputy president has come out every other time and said that he's going to create positions for the big bosses up there, but not for the people. And Abel came out yesterday sharply in a statement saying that it's not about creating positions, in a manner that was almost a feeling that he was directly disagreeing with his deputy. People have argued that. What does the DP has to lose? We have BBI, create bigger seats, pull in every Tom, Dick and Harry and say, let's form a government. What's happening?
See, this is a problem. I think the DP is really a believer in inclusive democracy. Number one, he's also a believer in our constitution. He holds the view that if we want to amend the constitution, there are ways of doing it. You can initiate a popular process, or you can do it by way of parliament. If you want to overhaul the constitution the way we did in relation to the constitution that was succeeded by the 2010 Katiba, you have to form an all-inclusive body to do that. Now, none of those processes have been triggered to date, okay? And so, basically, if you had the emphasis of the DP, it has always been about, if we must amend this constitution, let us amend it in a way that serves the interests of the guys down there, not the guys up there, because the guys who are high, the guys who are in power, the rich, the wealthy, those guys can pretty much take care of themselves. The people who need constitutional protection, and whose rights need to be even more safeguarded, are the Wanjikos of our country. They are the Odhiambos of our country. They are the Nafulas of our country. Those are the people that need to be protected. And so, if we are amending the constitution in a way that enriches, the experience of life on the part of these people, so be it. But if we are in fact amending the constitution in order to even entrench, chieftaincy, and the political ownership on the part of certain individuals, I think that is something that the deputy president would be opposed to. Yeah.
All right. As we move, before we move to the next topic, WILKISTER, the people who are selling us unity are not united. Even in body, in spirit, and in every manner. Yesterday it was almost evident. Even the way they are dancing, they don't feel like they want to dance closer to each other. That's the political class, Ambawa Kopaleju. And they're telling us, guys, we are coming, we're bringing a document that's going to unite you. Don't you think we need a BBI, first of all, for the politicians before you get to the Wananchi?
That's an interesting view. I think we are in a free space where we can express ourselves as we wish to. And the Constitution accords us that free space. For that matter, agreeing or disagreeing with something is okay. And at no point, unless maybe you're dealing with condors, will you have people agreeing 100%.
Some have actually agreed to be cows. Maybe condor is even...
It's condors because condors are stupid. So I choose that. So unless you have a room full of condors like that and you present something, then you'll have everyone say yes. But when you have a room full of thinkers, you will have people who will have divergent views, and that's okay. And I also want to comment on the multi-party democracy issue. There's a disconnect between our political organizing and our political parties. Our political organizing is ethno-regional. Our political parties purport to align with ideology. Case in study. An example is we had the Green Party. Following Michael Harvey, Nelson Harvey, to drink tea in Parliament.
They said we had just come to say hi.
The Green Party, from its name alone, already shows that they advocate for the environment, things around climate change and all that. So what was their space in advocating for whatever they were going to push with Nelson Harvey in Parliament? You see, there's a disconnect between what they purport to believe and what they're doing. We have parties that, are for the labor movements or support workers' rights. Do we even hear their voices anywhere? So there's a big problem between our political organizing and our political parties. And I think that's where we need to start changing so that we harmonize the two and define what our politics looks like. Because now it's a very confused space. And I don't know how the register of political parties can come in actually and make this a reality that if this is what you go by, then they hold you to account in the sense that you say you're a social democrat, then can you act like what? And for me, this is a message to all the political parties. What you propel, the ideology you believe in, the issues you believe in, let us see that in the politic of the day. Because we can't keep having our leaders just churning out abuse and, hate speech and all that. We need to see political parties actually championing issues in national papers and policy, not making the noise that we're seeing political parties making. And also in terms of the president's remarks and the inclusive reggae conversation, that is open. Kenyans want to have an inclusive conversation. The problem is we started the wrong way. So if this will go right, we do not know. But one thing that is also dangerous that is coming from this conversation is weaponizing poverty. Imagine a situation whereby you leave your house, Ngong or wherever, you have to pass through Kibra and get to Kibra and people tell you can't drive your car past here. And they take your car and they strip you of all you're wearing.
So that is now an Asla and Dynasty.
That is the kind of war we are trying to introduce in the BBI conversation that is going to hurt us as Kenyans. So let us avoid the class issue because it's going to create something that we might never recover from as a people. Right.
All right. Mambo habari ndio hiyo. Nasikia. Haya. Daktari, kwa nini tunapewa huduma namba kama narcotic? Nasikia kuna mtu ako naye, tumetoa kidogo tuliona rais aliingia na shati ametoka na suti. What's going on with this huduma number then?
I think it has a similar problem as as BBI actually, because if you look at its origins, it was introduced to Kenyans in a very stealth fashion. There was no education that preceded it, and therefore there's a cloud of suspicion that surrounds what Huduma Number is. Essentially, Huduma Number is meant to be, these, sophisticated technology-enabled personal identifier system and number, that enables citizens to access services from government. And it's supposed to replace all your other documents, I believe, except, your passport. It has, because it's technology enabled, they collect a lot of data from the citizens, including biometric data. And the number one problem has always been the privacy of this data and the security of this data. To what extent is it secure? To what extent will that data be manipulated? Can that data be sold? Can it be monetized? To third parties, and so this is a system that was introduced in India, and for 10 years there was a lot of agitation against it. And the Indian government, when it introduced the Aadhaar number, it's called the Aadhaar number in India, was challenged to put in place measures to ensure that, number one, that personal privacy is protected. That number two, people who don't even have biometric features, like persons with disability, and persons who are already excluded through other identification processes, because you need an ID card, for example, in order to have, Huduma Number. And if you don't have an ID card, that means you can't have it. So already those people are marginalized. Like I was talking about the Nubians earlier on and people in northern Kenya. So it can also serve to even entrench exclusion further. And so in India, the system was challenged until right now it's working, more or less at about 50 or 60%. And the promise that it had been, that had been made, which was that once you have the Aadhaar number in India, you will get services efficiently from government, etc., like cash transfers, because government will know where the old people are, who they are, their telephone numbers, and at a touch of a button, they'll be able to send, to remit money, because this system is also linked to banks, etc., etc. So the challenges around this system are really around privacy and data security, because the intention is to have the Huduma Number servers and their infrastructure linked and operable with banks, with all sorts of other institutions, and that in itself can improve efficiency. But it really it introduces massive surveillance. You know, the challenge is, you know, people's phones are already not as safe. People argue, you know, that their phones are surveilled upon, that their conversations are listened to. But now, in addition to that, when you have a number like Huduma Number, it becomes even now more possible, you know, for everything that you do to become, you know, you lose a sense of privacy. The constitutional right to privacy is pretty much lost at that point in time. And so people are a bit worried, people are anxious, and what is required is, again, a robust conversation, because for people to give up their rights, they need to understand that this is actually for the greater good. But the question is Huduma Number for the greater good? And to the extent that people don't have the information necessary to, you know, mitigate their doubts, you know, there is a general feeling that this is a nefarious tool that might be used for, for one or two other nefarious purposes.
On the same thing on class, your boss, Deputy President, has actually been criticized for selling the class disconnect, you know, between the hustlers and this study also came up with the same statement at Guse Stadium, where you're talking about, you was telling the president that the people who matter are the guys who are walking in, going to Mujengo, Watchmen, and all that. Wilkister has pointed out something that's quite interesting, because conversations in politics, narratives really sell, and they're very emotional. Politics very emotional. What would it get to a point where you're driving, you're coming here in the upmarket, and you need to pass through where hustlers are, and the hustlers are seeing you as a threat to their existence? What does that make you feel? At the point when you're talking about uniting people, then do we separate the rich from the poor? And then where will the rich coexist? Because the poor are just across. In Karen, Kibera is called the lower Karen. I mean, where do you pass through as a dynasty?
I think there is a bit of a misunderstanding in terms of what this narrative is really all about. I think number one is, it's not about the rich and the poor, because there are rich hustlers. You know, there are people, because the idea of a hustler is that these are people who have struggled through life and been able to make it. They've been able to transition from one level to another. You know, you start as a border rider, you know, suddenly because of your entrepreneurship, you have 2 or 3 borders, you buy a matatu, and then you build a house. All right? So you become economically independent. But that doesn't mean that you cease to be a hustler. So it's not really a class, it's not a class conversation. It's a conversation around dignity. Because these people, I think for a long time, we have wanted to render certain sections of our society invisible. You know, we have made the poor such an inconvenient truth that we do not want to discuss their issues. You know, we do not appreciate them, we do not dignify their livelihood. And so what the Deputy President is trying to do is to say, listen, there are people in this country whose livelihoods we need to acknowledge, we need to spotlight. We need to think around, how can we organize these livelihoods? How can we give them legal predictability and legal protection? You know, a person on Gong Road here who was selling, in a small kiosk, one morning woke up and that kiosk was not there because they don't have legal protection over the property, the little property that they have. How can that person be able to advance themselves? And so what this narrative is trying to introduce into our conversation is a conversation around, number one, dignity, and that it doesn't really matter where you start. You can always progress. You know. Number two, it's equal opportunity. That, you know, if you're giving property protection to the guy who owns 1,000 acres, you should be able to give property protection to a kiosk owner. All right? You should be able to accord them equal protection. Number three, what is the role of government in that respect? The role of government is to get out of, the way, and to allow and to be facilitative, of these sectors, of our economy. And so it is not, we have hustlers in Karen, we have hustlers in Runda, But we also have hustlers in Kibera and Kawangware and in other places. That's what this conversation really is all about. It's about the opportunity for social mobility, socio-economic mobility, and socio-economic progress for all. It's about, it's really about inclusion or economic inclusion for all. Yeah.
On the same criticism, he has been his agenda, or his initiative of actually distributing things like wheelbarrows and other things that have been criticized largely. Do you feel it's part of an economic empowerment project in terms of raising the atlas to the dynasty quote level? Do we rove around policy, or we talk about issue? Because I think that has come also under criticism. And I would want you to speak for it.
I think you need to understand it for what it is. It goes to this very issue I was talking about, the fact that there are sectors of our economy that we so look down upon. They are so denigrated that the guys who are doing that kind of activity are considered nobodies. They should not step anywhere close to power, anywhere close to authority. They should be somewhere far off from our eyes, from the glare of cameras, etc., etc. But what the Deputy President is saying is, come, let's have a conversation. Let's understand what is it that we can do as government, to make what you're doing produce for you and for your families even more. That's what it is about. So don't look at the wheelbarrow simplistically. It's really just a metaphor and a symbol for an economic,
for a class,
not a class, for an economic
activity,
an economic activity.
It could like be a farmer. Yes, it could give you a djembe.
Absolutely, it can give you a djembe. Does that emphasize class? It empowers you.
I really beg to disagree.
I saw that coming.
I beg to disagree that this is an economic. The Deputy President, where he sits, has authority to implement this in policy. We had all these funds, the Youth Development Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund, and all that. That is why those funds were created, to do the wheelbarrows that the Deputy President right now is doing. And it is timely for him to just realize today that there are Kenyans who are hustlers. All his years in leadership, has he never seen Kenyans who are hustlers? Why is it important for him to only purport to have that narrative at this point in time, when he sits at a place of authority and can actually mend the things that we're having a problem with?
You know how many cuckoos is given out to women since, I don't know, like 20 years ago?
The thing is not the chicken. It is not the chicken.
So chicken sellers are not hustlers?
Chicken sellers are, everyone is a hustler in their own right.
There you go.
And that is not the conversation we should be having. The Deputy President has power enough to have these things in policy and make them sustainable over the long term. So this reactionary approaches like giving wheelbarrows.
So you're talking about sustainability. I want to understand you.
This guy, let me tell you, he is not acting for government. I will not mince my words. He is acting for himself. If he was acting for government and the betterment of the people, there would be sustainability to whatever he's doing in terms of economic empowerment.
Okay, so your problem is sustainability.
My problem is he's not honest.